What if the most perfect place that ever existed on this earth was not a myth, not a dream, not a symbol, but a real, physical, geographical location that you could actually point to on a map? The Garden of Eden is one of those subjects that immediately divides people into two camps. Either it was a literal garden that God planted in a specific location on this earth, or it was simply a beautiful metaphor for spiritual innocence. But here is what most people do not realize: the Bible does not describe Eden the way you describe a symbol or a poem. It describes it the way you describe a place. It gives rivers, it gives directions, it gives the names of surrounding lands and regions. And when you take those geographical details seriously and start mapping them against what we know about the ancient world today, something extraordinary begins to emerge that will completely change the way you read Genesis chapter 2. Genesis chapter 2 gives us more geographical detail about the Garden of Eden than most people have ever stopped to notice. It tells us that a river flowed out of Eden to water the garden, and that from there it divided into 4 separate rivers. The first river is called Pison, described as flowing around the land of Havilah where gold is found. The second is called Gihon, said to flow around the entire land of Cush. The third is the Tigris, specifically described as flowing east of Assyria. And the fourth is the Euphrates, a river that still exists today and that every person with basic geographical knowledge can locate on a modern map right now. These are not vague poetic descriptions. These are specific, named, locatable geographical markers that the original readers of Genesis would have immediately recognized and understood. God was not describing a dream. He was describing a real place on a real earth. The fact that the Tigris and Euphrates are 2 of the 4 rivers of Eden is the single most important geographical clue in the entire passage, and it points us directly toward one specific region of the world. Both the Tigris and the Euphrates are real, existing rivers that flow through modern-day Iraq and Turkey. They are among the most historically significant rivers in all of human civilization. They define the region that ancient historians called Mesopotamia, which literally means the land between the rivers. This is the same region where the earliest known human civilizations emerged, where writing was first invented, where the first cities were built, where agriculture first developed on a large organized scale. The ancient Sumerians, the Babylonians, the Assyrians, all built their great civilizations in this exact region. Is it a coincidence that humanity's earliest and greatest civilizations all emerged in the same general geography where the Bible says human life began in a garden? That deserves serious thought. One of the most compelling modern theories about the exact location of the Garden of Eden was developed by Dr. Juris Zarins, a respected archaeologist who spent decades researching this question using satellite imagery, ancient geography, and geological data. His conclusion, published in serious academic contexts, was that the Garden of Eden may have been located at what is now the floor of the Persian Gulf. Here is the reasoning. At the end of the last ice age, sea levels around the world were significantly lower than they are today. The Persian Gulf, which is relatively shallow, would have been largely dry land during that period. The Tigris and Euphrates rivers, along with 2 other ancient rivers now identified as the Kuwait River and the Karun River in Iran, would have all converged and flowed together across that dry Gulf floor into the Arabian Sea. 4 rivers, 1 convergence point, exactly matching the Genesis description. One of the reasons the Garden of Eden is so difficult to locate today is something the Bible itself explains: the global flood of Noah's time. Genesis describes a catastrophic worldwide flood that covered the entire earth, reshaped landscapes, redirected rivers, buried geological formations under enormous layers of sediment, and fundamentally altered the physical geography of the entire planet. The world that existed before Noah's flood was literally a different world geographically. River systems that existed before the flood do not necessarily correspond to river systems that exist today. Mountain ranges shifted, coastlines changed. Land masses that were above water before the flood may now sit beneath oceans. This means that even if we knew the precise coordinates of Eden before the flood, those coordinates might now be pointing at the bottom of a sea. God did not preserve the garden through the flood. In fact, Genesis tells us he placed cherubim with a flaming sword to guard the entrance, suggesting he intended it to be permanently inaccessible to fallen humanity. The river Gihon, described in Genesis as flowing around the entire land of Cush, adds a fascinating and complex layer to this geographical puzzle. In the Old Testament, Cush almost always refers to the region of Ethiopia and Sudan, the ancient African territory south of Egypt. This creates an immediate geographical challenge because if the Gihon flowed around Cush, which is in Africa, while the Tigris and Euphrates are in the Middle East, how could all 4 rivers have originated from the same single source in Eden? Some researchers have pointed to the Blue Nile, which originates in the Ethiopian highlands and has historically been associated with the name Gihon in Jewish tradition. The ancient city of Jerusalem also had a spring called Gihon, suggesting the name was used for multiple water sources across the ancient world. The pre-flood world may have had a completely different continental water system that connected these regions in ways we cannot fully reconstruct today. Another serious geographical theory places the Garden of Eden not in flat Mesopotamia or under the Persian Gulf, but in the mountainous region of eastern Turkey near the headwaters of the Tigris and Euphrates rivers. This theory has gained attention from researchers including David Rohl, a respected Egyptologist and historian who wrote extensively about the historical evidence for the Exodus and Genesis narratives. Rohl identified a region in northwestern Iran near the city of Tabriz as the most likely location for Eden, with the 4 rivers flowing outward from a central highland source. The geography of eastern Turkey and northwestern Iran features exactly the kind of elevated, well-watered, river-generating terrain that would match the Genesis description of a river flowing out of Eden and then dividing into 4 branches. Mountains are natural river sources, and the headwaters of both the Tigris and Euphrates do indeed originate in this mountainous region of eastern Turkey, a fact that continues to draw researchers back to this area. Here is something that the archaeology of Mesopotamia and the surrounding region consistently confirms: the earliest evidence of complex human civilization. Agriculture, animal domestication, and organized settlement all emerges from this same general geographic zone that the Bible identifies as the cradle of human origins, the earliest known temple complex in human history, Göbekli Tepe in southeastern Turkey, dates back approximately 12,000 years and sits in the exact region where several Eden location theories converge. It predates writing, predates pottery, predates any previously known organized human religion. It was built by people who were clearly far more sophisticated than the primitive hunter-gatherers that mainstream archaeology expected to find at that time period. Its existence forces a complete rethinking of how early and how quickly human beings developed complex spiritual and social behavior, which aligns far more closely with the biblical narrative than with previous secular assumptions about human origins and development. Before we get completely absorbed in the geography, which is genuinely fascinating, it is worth pausing to ask a deeper question. Why did God plant a garden in the first place? What was the theological purpose of Eden beyond being a beautiful place for humans to live? The Garden of Eden was not simply God's gift of a comfortable habitat for his new creation. It was designed as a place of intimate, unbroken, face-to-face communion between God and humanity. It was the original sacred space, the first temple, if you want to think of it that way. God walked in the garden in the cool of the day. He spoke directly with Adam and Eve. There was no barrier, no separation, no distance between creator and creation. Eden was the original design for what the relationship between God and humanity was always supposed to look like: close, personal, daily, and completely unhindered by sin or shame or distance of any kind. Here is the most powerful truth about the Garden of Eden that most people completely miss in this conversation. The story of Eden does not end in Genesis chapter 3 with the fall and the exile. It ends in Revelation chapter 22 with a garden restored. The last 2 chapters of the entire Bible describe a new creation where the river of the water of life flows crystal clear from the throne of God and of the Lamb. The tree of life, the same tree that was in the middle of the Garden of Eden, appears again on both sides of that river. And this time there is no cherubim with a flaming sword blocking the way. This time the gates are never shut. This time humanity has full, permanent, unhindered access to the presence of God forever. Eden was not just the beginning of the story. Eden is the destination the entire Bible is moving toward. And because of Jesus, the second Adam who succeeded where the first Adam failed, the garden is coming back.